For this video, we will learn how to part-write repeated chords in root position, where the soprano moves to a different note of the chord. Here's an example of a C chord written in 4 parts where the soprano moves from an E to a G. Notice that the bass note stays the same for both chords because they are in root position, but the soprano, alto, and tenor notes move. Generally, when we voice repeated triads, the soprano will move from one note of the chord up or down to the next closest note of the chord. Here's an example of a D chord with the bass and the soprano notes filled in. We will complete the harmonization. Since we are in the key of D, this is a 1 chord. Notice that the bass stays the same since we are working with repeated root position D chords. Also notice that the soprano moves from F sharp to A. From F sharp, A is the next note of the chord up. First, we will notate the alto and tenor voices for the first chord. Since the F sharp is lower than the 4th line D, we will voice this chord in close position. So all we need to do is fill in the notes of the D chord going down from the F sharp. The next note down is D, so this note will go to the alto. The next note down from the D is A, and this will go to the tenor. For the next D chord, all that changes is the soprano, but it is still a root position D chord. Since the second note of the soprano is the next note of the chord above the first soprano note, all we need to do is maintain the position. Since the first chord was close position, the second chord will also be in close position. So moving down from the A, the alto will receive an F sharp, and the tenor will receive a D. Let's try another example. Here is a root position G chord in the key of C. The Roman numeral analysis is 5. Notice that G is in the bass for both chords since we are working with a root position G triad. The soprano begins on G, then moves up to D. In our previous examples, the soprano moved from one note of the chord to the closest note of that same chord, up or down. In this example, we are skipping the closest note up, which is B, and proceeding to the D note. We are therefore skipping a note of the chord. In this situation, we will need to use both open and close position chords. Before we voice the chords this way, let's voice them the improper way to discover the problem that arises. The first chord has G in the soprano. This note is sufficiently low to use the close position voicing. Let's work down from the soprano to the closest notes of the chord to determine the alto and tenor notes. The next note down from the soprano is D. This is the alto note. And the next note down from the D is B. This is the tenor note. To voice the second chord in the previous examples, we maintain the position. Let's follow this process and voice the second chord in close position. Moving down from the D, we have a B for the alto. Moving down from the B, we have a G for the tenor. Now this voicing by itself is a good voicing. The tenor note is in the extended range, but everything else is ideal. The problem is that we have created a type of cross voicing between the two chords. Notice that the B in the alto has moved above the G in the soprano in the previous chord. Also, the G in the tenor has moved above the D in the alto voice in the previous chord. Moving above or below the adjacent voice in the previous chord is known as cross voicing. Common practice composers generally avoid this type of cross voicing because it obscures the individual melodic lines. To avoid cross voicing, we will harmonize the second chord in open position. We can keep the B in the tenor voice and move the alto to G. Let's summarize this lesson. When voicing repeated root position triads, if the soprano moves up or down to the closest note of the chord, maintain the position as open or close. If the soprano skips a note of the chord moving up or down, change from an open to a close or a close to an open position depending on the direction of the soprano. This will help to avoid cross voicing.